Deixa eu tirar da tela ali. Pronto. Agora. O celular ontem virou passou.
Eu vou dar o suporte para vocês aqui.
O pendrive é aqui. Eu acho que tem que dar um stop. Tem que dar um stop nesse vídeo. O vídeo está rolando.
So it says Brazil.
This is
Brazil.
just a moment. I'm going to copy here. Okay.
Open it.
Open.
And one on working.
This one here?
Working degradation. Yeah, take this one. Can you open it?
Yes.
But then please erase it from the desktop, okay?
Okay.
Because there are many proprietary.
That's fine. Totally
Yeah,
fine.
it's okay.
Okay.
Okay?
This one? Okay, so I'm going to...
Okay. Can you pull out the slide for me and then erase it from the desktop?
Yes.
Pausar o vídeo. Eu acho que está rolando.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
O vídeo estava rolando. Só que tá... Sim. Vai ficar gravado lá e passo o link da gravação. Sim. Aqui está tudo em ordem. A apresentação dele, tem 2 vídeos aqui.
Então você pode ser a mestra de cerimônias? Você vai chamando a gente.
Beyond the day-to-day, and sometimes making tough decisions in crisis situations. As the CEO of Rambam and also as a grandfather, I find myself wondering how we will care for these children's medical needs 20, 30, or it requires looking.
Tá bom, a Regina não vai
Rambam
falar.
Healthcare Campus é mais que um
Então
hospital.
fala de novo.
É um ativo estratégico para o Estado.
Não, você não vai falar, não vai ter problema. Você me chama primeiro, é isso? Não, então a gente já passa ali, né? Já. E aí eu passo a palavra para você e você vai chamando as pessoas, pode ser?
Localizado em Haifa, o Rambam serve de centro de referência terciário para 12 hospitais distritais. Somos o Rambam, o local onde a inovação é um ativo estratégico para o Estado. Localizado em Haifa, o Rambam serve de centro de referência terciário para 12 hospitais distritais. Somos o Rambam, o local onde a inovação revolucionária, a pesquisa e a academia são os pilares do nosso ADN. nos colocando na vanguarda da medicina em O tempo é essencial para salvar vidas. Desenvolvemos um aplicativo pioneiro de gerenciamento de AVC para diagnosticar e tomar decisões rapidamente.
Ele falou para nós temos
Realizamos mais intervenções de AVC do que qualquer outro hospital em Israel. No Rambam, a pesquisa inovadora é orientada por nossos pacientes. Muitos de nossos excelentes médicos lideram pesquisas médicas científicas em uma ampla gama de tópicos, todas voltadas para melhorar o futuro e dar vida à ciência. Estabelecemos um centro de pesquisa de cannabis medicinal, o único de seu tipo no mundo. A Rambam MedTech.
Vocês são para ele aqui? Ó.
tudo certo? Sim, é bom porque só tem esse aqui, né? Tá. Good morning, everyone. It's with great pleasure that I open this session today. And I'm going to pass the word to Anna, who is going to call the persons for the table. Please.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Good morning. And today we are going to watch Professor Aaron Ciechanover. Sorry? Ciechanover. Thank you. To talk about the degradation of cellular proteins, all the way from hypothesis to life-saving drugs, and on the way to the Nobel Prize. So we are going to start with the Rambam Healthcare Campus with this video called Estamos Construindo o Futuro da Medicina.
Localizado em Haifa, o Rambam serve de centro de referência terciário para 12 hospitais distritais. Somos o Rambam, um local onde a inovação revolucionária, a pesquisa e a academia são os pilares do nosso ADN, nos colocando na vanguarda da medicina em todo o mundo. O tempo é essencial para salvar vidas. Desenvolvemos um aplicativo pioneiro de gerenciamento de AVC para diagnosticar e tomar decisões rapidamente. Realizamos mais intervenções de AVC do que qualquer outro hospital em Israel. No Rambam, a pesquisa inovadora é orientada por nossos pacientes. Muitos de nossos excelentes médicos lideram pesquisas médicas científicas em uma ampla gama de tópicos, todas voltadas para melhorar o futuro e dar vida à ciência. Estabelecemos um centro de pesquisa de cannabis medicinal, o único de seu tipo no mundo. A Rambam MedTech, nossa empresa de transferência de tecnologia, identifica ideias inovadoras, ajudando nossos pesquisadores e médicos a criar produtos médicos, patenteados, comercializados e de classe mundial. Somos parceiros na incubadora do setor de saúde digital MindUp, juntamente com as empresas de tecnologia líderes globais. A equipe de software interno do Rambam desenvolveu um sistema de registros computadorizados de ponta, em colaboração com a nossa equipe médica para a nossa equipe médica. Juntamente com líderes de tecnologia médica, transformamos ideias em realidade. Usamos tecnologia baseada em grandes volumes de dados e de inteligência artificial, permitindo cuidados a pacientes melhores e mais precisos. Nossas colaborações com as principais instituições acadêmicas e de pesquisa criam um ambiente que suporte a inovação e a excelência. Somos o único centro no norte de Israel que oferece tratamento oncológico multidisciplinar. Nossa pesquisa clínica e translacional garante maior disponibilidade de medicamentos experimentais, posicionando-nos entre os principais centros a nível mundial. Alojamos o único hospital infantil no norte de Israel e somos reconhecidos nacionalmente por nossa excelência. As crianças são o nosso recurso mais precioso. Ao cuidar de nossos jovens pacientes, lembramos sempre que um abraço e um sorriso também ajudam. O que nos torna líderes no estado do coração? O Rambam está na vanguarda da medicina cardíaca. Nossos pacientes se beneficiam das mais avançadas tecnologias e cuidados. Nossos departamentos de cardiologia e cirurgia cardíaca oferecem tratamentos integrativos como o implante de coração artificial. O Eyal Offer Heart Hospital deverá ser a nova casa de ambos os departamentos. Como parte das disciplinas emergentes da medicina regenerativa e de precisão, nosso centro de células-tronco, revolucionário e de ponta, desenvolve terapias biológicas personalizadas para diferentes problemas cardíacos. Estamos sempre prontos para todos os cenários possíveis. Com base nas lições aprendidas com a Segunda Guerra do Líbano, quando civis e soldados foram tratados enquanto estavam sob fogo, fortificamos o Departamento de Medicina de Urgência e construímos uma garagem de estacionamento subterrâneo, que se transforma em um hospital de emergência subterrâneo fortificado, o maior de seu tipo no mundo. Tratamos mais pacientes de traumas do que todos os outros hospitais israelenses. Equipes médicas de todo o mundo visitam o centro de ensino do Rambam para situações de trauma, emergência e de elevado número de vítimas, para estudar nosso modelo de gerenciamento de emergência. Aconselhamos e ajudamos a estabelecer instalações médicas e temos orgulho de salvar vidas em todo o mundo. Esta guerra do Covid-19 representou um enorme desafio para os sistemas de saúde a nível mundial, incluindo em Israel. A resposta da Rambam à pandemia tem sido uma estratégia gradativa. Construímos 2 departamentos dedicados ao Covid-19 e convertemos o Hospital de Emergência Subterrâneo fortificado Sami Offer em uma instalação de tratamento do Covid-19. Tratamos milhares de pacientes com coronavírus. Atingir isso exigiu centenas de trabalhadores de todos os setores do hospital, trabalhando 24 horas por dia. Foram estabelecidas colaborações com a indústria e o IDF para fornecer soluções técnicas inovadoras para proteger os pacientes e a equipe contra infecções. Ao mesmo tempo, nossas equipes profissionais passaram por treinamento para enfrentar esse enorme desafio. No Rambam, temos uma missão. Nossas equipes estão sempre comprometidas em aprender, treinar e melhorar, esforçando-se por nos tornarmos ainda melhores. No coração do nosso campus, estamos construindo a Helmsley Health Discovery Tower. O apoio de amigos em todo o mundo nos permitirá enfrentar os desafios médicos futuros. Este é o Rambam. Isto é quem somos. Para nós, a medicina não é apenas uma profissão. É um modo de vida. Estamos criando o futuro da medicina. Rambam Healthcare Campus é mais...
So we would like to invite our special guests to occupy the honor seats. Professor Michael Halberthal, please. Professor Rafi Beyer. And Professor Aaron G. Hanover.
Cellular. It's hard for us.
We would like to invite as well Professor Helena Nader and Professor Regina Marcos. We would like to promote we'd like to give our special thank you to Professor Rubens Belfort, who is here today with us, and to CNBI Brazil, which is the Confederação Nacional das Câmaras do Comércio Brasil-Israel, and Academia Brasileira de Ciências. This event's part of the celebrations for the 90th anniversary on the Escola Paulista de Medicina. So please, Professor Mikhail. Mickey, sorry, Mickey.
Mickey, very simple. Mickey
I think it's off. Sorry.
Mickey is very simple.
Sorry, Professor.
Again, Mickey is very simple. No professor, no nothing. Very much thanks for you being here this morning. It's great to see young people here. I think it's very important. The idea that we are here is exactly that. I thank the faculty for hosting us. So as you saw, I'm the CEO of Rambam Healthcare Campus. I am pediatric intensive care physician. For the last 4.5 years, I'm running the hospital. And our philosophy is first to collaborate. We believe is that the knowledge that we gathered is not ours, it's for us to share. And all of us here as medical people, I think that this is the basic of medicine, you know. We are now introducing ourselves to Latin America in order to build up cooperation, educational cooperation, research and innovation. I think that we are all facing the same issues, and we want to have the immense impact, and by cooperation we'll have those impacts. And I'm sure that here, us and the facilities, the academic facilities and the hospitals in Sao Paulo will have huge amount of collaboration. It's unbelievable and amazing facilities. And it's a privilege to be here. So I thank you very much. And I think that I'll introduce Rafi. Let's do it simple.
We are going to watch. Yeah, we are going to watch this other.
Okay. So before that, I'll just give a word or two. You know, when you become a manager of a hospital, it's a complicated system, and you tend to sink in on the day-to-day. And the idea that we're here looking at you people, the young people, is to think about the future. And we have a commitment, and I think that all of us share. The commitment is for our patients. And what you see here in the next video is looking at Rambam, the hospital that I am the CEO of, looking 40 years ahead to 2065. Because if we have the commitment and if we have to continue to give medical care in the facility in the next 40 years or so, we have to think about that also. So part of the vision is to think to the future, not only at the day-to-day, and you are the future. So I think that this is very important. So we'll see the short video about that. You will not see that.
Oh, we can, yeah. I would like this.
Managing a hospital is a huge challenge. It requires looking beyond the horizon, beyond the day-to-day, and sometimes making tough decisions in crisis situations. As the CEO of Rambam and also as a grandfather, I find myself wondering how we will care for these children's medical needs 20, 30, or even 40 years from now. Profoundly committed to pioneering medical services in northern Israel, both now and in decades ahead, the entire management team has come together to shape a common vision and an intergenerational master plan that will secure a healthy future for all our children and for many generations to come. Nine or 10 new high-rises, some with more than 30 floors, will gradually replace most of the current buildings, making the campus 5 times bigger than it is today, with 2.5 times more beds. This will enable us to fulfill our vision for a campus where health and well-being takes center stage and where we can provide the best medical care to everyone who comes through our doors. From using stem cells to repair damaged organs through innovative imaging technology, state-of-the-art laboratories will help our medical teams provide patients with the best possible care, including slowing the aging process and preventing disease through early diagnosis. This medical campus promotes recovery and prevents illness within a healing environment that is not a luxury, but an absolute necessity, where all the inpatient room, treatment centers, and open areas will convey the calm, relaxing atmosphere. Rambam will be a shining light for medicine, a beacon where research, innovation, and advanced technology are combined. Future generations will be taught how to keep dreaming, building, and healing. I've been working at Rambam for 37 years, including the last 4 years as CEO. This is, to my mind, the most significant event of my term, bigger than a pandemic, bigger than anything else I will ever do. A groundbreaking master plan for a groundbreaking medical center. Rambam 2065, creating the future of medicine.
Professor Rafi.
Hi, it's an honor to be here with you. I thank you for inviting us for this amazing event, and congratulations on your celebration 19th years. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I call myself a plumber, and I'm a graduate of Tel Aviv University, of Technion, PhD in biomedical engineering, trained in Johns Hopkins. I was Dean of the Faculty of Medicine of the Technion and served as a CEO of the hospital before Mickey for 13 years. What was missing in your 40 years, movie is drones, ambulances flying around, and self-driving cars and robots actually treating our patients. Anyhow, I mean, I think that my vision 40 years ago, if we talk about 40 years ahead, 40 years ago, I dreamed about medicine and engineering going hand in hand. I wasn't sure what I want to study, engineering or medicine. I was a confused little boy. But then I studied both of them. And throughout my life, both as an innovator, I developed stents, I developed robotic catheterization. As a Faculty of Medicine Dean, I actually created programs that actually bring engineers into the Faculty of Medicine as students and combining the things. And at Rambam, when I was CEO, this was also a major thing, how to do research and innovation, an integral part of the hospital, something that is daily life in the hospital, not something that you do rarely and occasionally. And I think that's really the vision that I'm continue to push for, and it's really an exciting event with you, the future generations which are sitting here. We're talking about collaboration program between Israel and Brazil, and between Rambam and Technion and the Faculty of Medicine and the School of Medicine here, and I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
So before I pass the microphone to Professor Elena Nader, that I'm sure doesn't need many introductions in this audience, I want to acknowledge the presence of Professor Ronaldo Tomatielli, representing the Dean for Research and Graduate Programs. Thank you, Ronaldo.
Thank you, Marimélia. For me, it's an honor to be here this morning. I want once again to thank Professor Aaron for all the beautiful work he has done and the pleasure of having several of our students here listening to your lecture. It's an honor for us. And I want to thank Professor Rubens Belfort as well for having this meeting going on. And I want to mention that for the Brazilian Academy of Science, we are pretty sure that this is just the beginning of a strong relationship in terms of science, technology, and innovation between our countries, but especially between my alma mater, Escola Paulista de Medicina, Federal University of São Paulo, and the Technion and Ramban. It's an honor to have you here, and we're going, certainly, next year, we're going to have a meeting here on biomedical science together, the Brazilian Academy of Science, the Israeli Academy of Science, Technion and Ramban, to discuss and show how we have already moved forward. Thank you so much.
Now, Professor Regina Marcos, who was a professor here at Escola Paulista de Medicina, and then she went to USP. And Regina, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's my pleasure to present Professor Aaron. You don't need any presentation. You are the presentation. And I will say to all the students that are, many of them were my students, many of them were my colleagues, I am in my alma mater. And also I am here, there and there. I am ubiquitous. Ubiquity, ubiquidade in Portuguese, means to be in any place in all times. And really, when we teach all what you have done, and from basic science to translation, dealing with the ubiquitin molecule that is in many places and in many times to do different things, it is really, I don't want to lose a minute to hear what you have to tell us. It's my pleasure to be here. 90 years of Escola Paulista de Medicina, 85 years of Rambam, and a Nobel Prize. Thank you very much for being here.
That will be the best. Okay, so let's start. Good morning, everybody. My name is Aaron Ciechanover, and I'm a physician by education, graduated the School of Medicine of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and following my military service as a combat physician, I went to the Technion to do my PhD, and during my PhD, along with my mentor, Professor Avram Hershko, we discovered the ubiquitin system. At that time, of course, we knew that it's novel, because the modification, I'm going to tell you about it, not in a awfully complicated technical jargon, but just very briefly, we knew that it's novel, but we had no clue that it's important. And it took several decades to people to pick up on it, initially to understand that aberrations in the system lead to diseases, mostly to neurodegeneration and to malignancies, and then to the pharma company to walk in and to develop very successful drugs that are being used all over the world. I think that the lesson to be learned is about the beauty of science. I mean, people are talking about translational research versus basic research, about applied research versus, again, basic research. And I say that this terms are completely wrong. I think that good science at the end leads also to translation. So for me, the distinction is not between applied and basic, but between good and bad science. So I think that this is a different concept, because without asking basic biological questions, nobody would have discovered the ubiquitin system, and the result that there wouldn't have been any drugs that are utilizing this platform. So I think that this is a nice lesson to learn. On the other hand is that I think that I was in personal lucky, because I started quite early and I was able to see this little kid that started out of an hypothesis that there is such a system, not the ubiquitin system. We didn't know anything about ubiquitin. We discovered it. We lead at the end of the road, or maybe not at the end of the road, we are at the very beginning of the road to development of drugs that are saving the lives of millions of people worldwide. So we started with some hypotheses, and it took decades, not for us, for other people, for the pharma company, to develop it into a big fundamental discovery in biology and in medicine. So let's start. I will just tell you the story, the thinking along the story. I shall use very little technological jargon. So this is the beautiful city of Haifa. And you can see here, we were just talking about Rambam Hospital. It's here. And the medical is here. And this collaboration between the two is essential for development of science and innovations in medicine. So we are really neighbors, but not only neighbors, but very good neighbors. We are really working together. So we are talking about digestion of proteins, and a lot was known about digestion of proteins before. We are digesting proteins in the intestine, but that's occurring outside the body, because the gastrointestinal tract is a tube that crossing the body from the mouth to the anus, but it's extracorporeal. Why we do it? Because we cannot challenge the immune system by introducing foreign proteins. So we take all the proteins that are coming from the wonderful Brazilian steaks and the wonderful Dutch cheese, and we are degrading them into amino acids, and we take the amino acids and we are building our own proteins. So that's the story, not to challenge the immune system. Then we are moving into the body, but we are still outside the cells, and there are many proteolytic systems that we are known to cause diseases outside the cell. One of them was, of course, the blood coagulation system, which is a cascade of proteolytic event where one protease activates the other and activate the other, and at the very end, prothrombin is converted to thrombin to make the blood clot. This is an awfully important mechanism to protect us from profuse bleeding, but it has it's kind of a double-edged sword. Why? Because we don't want clotting to occur where we don't need clotting to occur. For example, we don't want the blood to clot in the coronary arteries, which will lead to myocardial infarction, right? So this is an example of location. We need to regulate the process that it will occur only in the appropriate location. And then we are moving into the cell, and in the cell, people knew already about the lysosome, and the lysosome is an organelle surrounded by a membrane, and inside there is proteolytic event. The lysosome takes into it proteins that are coming from the outside of the cells, like ligands, like insulin, like hormones, like the LDL core that brings cholesterol, and degrade them. The issue with the lysosome that it's non-selective. It's like the stomach. Everything that goes in will be degraded. And we asked ourselves a very specific question. How the cell degrades proteins in a specific manner. What does mean specific? Specific means that if we have 1,000 molecules of the same species in the cell, of course, each protein is represented by millions of copies. Let's say that one molecule of hexokinase or RNA polymerase, doesn't matter, get misfolded. We need a very accurate pair of spectacles that will find only this single molecule. We'll pick it up, we'll throw it to the garbage, we'll synthesize another one to replace it, but leave all the other 999 intact. Now, for proteolytic system, this is a very difficult task. Because think about proteolysis. It's a destructive process. You take food, you put it into your stomach, doesn't matter how much you paid in the restaurant for it. Within a few minutes, it's all gone to amino acid, right? In the lysosome, you put into the lysosome a protein, it's non-discriminatory. We were looking for a discriminatory system. Discriminatory systems are very tough in nature. When you're going to destroy a house, you cannot just, remove the air conditioning system unless you bring an expert that will dig all the wires out of the wall. Typically, you bring a crane and you break the whole thing, and then you bring some trucks that takes all the rubbles away. Destructive is non-selective by nature. Construction is selective. And here we were asking something that, so we posed the question a priori, and we knew what we are looking for. We didn't know the mechanism, but we knew a priori what we are looking for. By the way, the whole work was done by me being a graduate student with an excellent mentor. So it shows you that graduate students are not all doomed. At the end, you may even meet the King of Sweden. So why we degrade proteins at all? Why we are not being born and eat, whatever our mother feeds us, the milk, and then eat some good food, grow to the age of 16 or 18, and then carry all the proteins all the way until we die? Because of several good reasons. One, proteins are very sensitive. They are sensitive to temperature, they are sensitive to mutations, they are sensitive to air pollution, to chemicals, to modification. They're very sensitive. Think about a protein, again, we are in Brazil, Brazilian steak. Take the raw meat, put it on the table for 1 day, come after 1 day and see what happened to it. It will come brownish, stinking, you have to throw it. These proteins got rotten. You had to put it in the refrigerator, or better, even in the freezer, in order to prevent the Brownian movement that will kill the proteins. Now think about the conundrum. What happens in the body? The body is not at room temperature. The body is at 37 degrees centigrade. So in the body, it's even worse. The steak in my body, we have steaks in the body. We are not cannibals, so we don't want to think in these terms, but think about all the muscles. We have a huge mass of muscles in there, and they're all kind of steaks. So think about it. They are holding on in high quality, functional high quality, not for a day, not for a month, not for a year, not for a decade, but for decades to go. So what is the difference between the steak or the piece of cheese or the milk, which are all proteins that we left on the table, to our body? We are live organisms. The destruction is keep on going in our body. But in our body, we have a system that replaces it, that can detect these misfolded, denatured, mutated, non-functional proteins and take them away, while in the dead meat on the table, this system is dead. So that's the difference. And in the body, on top of it, we have a system to replace it, but exactly by the same amount. I lose a molecule, I make a molecule, not two, one. So there is a very strict balance in the body that keeps us running in high quality. Now, what happens if the idea doesn't work? Forget about the system. We get sick. And I'll bring you two small examples that you never heard of. One is called cancer. Cancer is a disease of quality control because it's driven by oncoproteins. Oncoproteins are normal cellular proteins that were either mutated in our body, so we were born with normal p53, but it got mutated, or they were hijacked by viruses, became oncogenes, and the viruses bring them back, like the EBV, the Epstein-Barr virus, right? So these are wrong proteins that normally should be removed, detected by whatever quality control system, but the system fails to detect them, and they are not degraded. Or think about neurodegeneration, think about Alzheimer's, think about Parkinson, think about ALS. These are all aggregated proteins that somehow aggregated in the cells of the brain and are not removed. And one of the disadvantages of the brain, maybe it's one of its advantages, that cells don't divide. They cannot dilute the mistake. Once you make a mistake, you need to remove it. The protein, the cell will not divide and dilute the mistake among 2, 4, 8, and 16 cells. So we need to have a very accurate system in the brain in order to take care of this aggregated protein. If the system doesn't work, the result are neurodegenerative diseases. So here you already see what might be the problem if this process doesn't work properly. So there was a need to find the system. There was also a strategy. Israel is a well-developed country, but we are very small. It was in the 70s. We were still very poor. So we decided to go against the stream. Everybody in the world was busy with the central dogma of biology. DNA makes RNA, makes proteins. We decided to go the opposite direction. It was not easy. People told us that we are actually walking knowingly to the academic cemetery just to have a nice funeral. But, okay, funerals are nice ceremonies from time to time. So we decided nevertheless to participate in this parade. But it was dangerous because people didn't appreciate, and we didn't either, I must admit, we didn't appreciate either the importance because you don't know where you are walking, but it was something that was, at least for us, non-competitive. People were not asking this question at all. We were alone in the desert, which at the end paid off, but you are taking a risky way. So one reason why we degrade protein is, of course, quality control. Another is control of processes. Think about COVID-19. We are generating antibodies, let's say that we are getting immunized or because of viral infection. The production of the antibodies is run by transcription factor. Now there is no disease. We don't need to keep on producing protein, the antibodies. It's enough for us to have the T cells keeping the memory, so we can shut down the system by degrading the transcription factor, and then we shut down the process. So another role of protein degradation, again, selective protein degradation, is removing healthy, functional, good proteins that we don't need anymore at the time. We might awake them once we need them. We might keep the memory of them, but we don't need them currently. So this is another reason. Another reason is, of course, differentiation and morphogenesis. Remember, we are made of an egg, right, of an ovum and of a sperm. All the genes are transcribed. Then we start a process, the embryo is dividing, start the process of speciation, of differentiation. We want the liver to be liver, we want the brain to be brain. So we are removing proteins that are not needed. And again, what happens in cancer? Cancer in many ways is the disease of dedifferentiation, right? So we are dedifferentiating, we are bringing the tissue back to its embryonic stage in many ways, rapidly dividing, losing the characteristics of the tissue, and so on and so forth. So you see that there are many good reasons why we degrade protein. And just to give you a map, initially protein degradation was not recognized. Of course, it was the DNA, Watson-Crick, and so on. But gradually people recognized the importance, and I think that Nobel Prizes were given to all the major discovery in protein degradation. Let's start with the lysosome and autophagy. So Christian Dediv, the late Christian Dediv, and then later on for autophagy, Yoshinori Osumi. Then apoptosis, of course, to Sidney Brenner, Bob Horvitz, and John Salson. And I think that we closed the circle of the major three processes that are involved in protein degradation. Now let's go to the history a little bit and pay credit to the history. People did realize that the body is dynamic, that we are degrading our protein. The first of them was Rudolf Schönheimer, a Jewish German scientist that, like many other Jews, was fired from his university in Freiburg, kicked to the United States, and continued his work in the United States. But there were many of them. Actually, Germany, by kicking out the Jewish scientists, lost about 16 Nobel Prizes, 16 that were all made by Jews that made the discoveries in Germany, but then kicked out, and America, collected all the glory. And what Rudolf Schönheimer found is that when you are feeding amino acid to rats, the amino acids are going into proteins, they are incorporated into proteins, but then they are phasing out. So he kind of coined the term, the dynamic state of body macromolecules. He did it not only for proteins, he did it for lipids and for sugars as well. So he was the first, of course, no clue about the mechanism, but at least there was a definition. And it's very interesting to remember the history because a book was written about all these Jews. I will not go to the authors of the book. The author's story is also very interesting, but it's called Hitler's Gift. This was probably the only gift that Hitler gave to anybody in his lifetime, and that these Jews, given on a silver platter, both to the UK and to the United States. One of them, of course, was Albert Einstein. You can see him here in the famous hospital here in Sao Paulo, but many other institutions worldwide that escaped Europe, sensing that something is wrong, went to the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton University and got the prize for something that he discovered in Switzerland and in Germany. So this was one example. Now, what nice about protein degradation, again, this is one of the very few technological slides that I'm going to show you, that it requires metabolic energy. Typically, you will wonder what we are eating protein, and we are eating protein in order to derive energy. So why we have to invest energy in already high energy macromolecule? Why? Because of specificity. And I'll explain you. You see here an experiment, this is protein degradation. Doesn't matter even in which system, and you can see how proteins are degraded. But once you trap in A, there is, you see in the black holes, there is, you trap the oxygen and you convert it to nitrogen, protein degradation stops altogether. So once in an atmosphere of oxygen, of nitrogen, there is no oxygen. Now, why do we need it? Whenever the cell has to control a process, and as I said, proteolysis is destructive, but we don't want to destroy the cell. We want only to pick up one single molecule in order to degrade it and keep all the rest intact. We need to invest energy. Specificity and energy go hand by hand, but this was something that led us to the discovery because it was added to our definition. What we were actually in one line when I had to, it's always good to have a mission statement. Whatever you do, you establish the Faculty of Medicine, you do something, write to yourself one sentence, what do you want to achieve? We wanted to discover an energy-dependent, specific proteolytic system. That's what we wanted to discover. So we realized that in order to be specific, we need to invest energy. So, and that's what we were after. This is Christian de Div that I mentioned to you. They discovered, of course, the lysosome. But as I said, once the lysosome engulfs a protein, it's degraded non-specifically. So the lysosome was out. So now it was time to understand really what's going in nature. And again, you're always, this is another, I think, symbol of humbleness, that you should always remember that whatever you discover, you are part of a chain. There were people before you that did something, and there will always be people after you that will take it further. So this is nice to remember. And what people before us, thank you very much. And what people before us discovered is the principle of specificity. So we knew that there must be, and here you can see, just measurement of half-lifetimes of different proteins, doesn't matter what they are. Some are living in the cell for 12 minutes, some are living for 15 hours, and the rest are in between. Which means that each protein is degraded according to its own story. It's not, if I take all these proteins and throw them into the stomach, within 5 minutes they will all gone. Doesn't matter who they are. So, but in the body, in the cell, they are degraded in different rates. It means that there is a system that can make a distinction and tune them to according to the needs of the cell. So this was one line and this was taken from a Fred Goldberg review in '76, just before we entered the system. And then, of course, came the energy principle. So the issue was to choose a system. Of course, you can ask the most wonderful questions in life that you want, but at the end of the day, you need to go to the bench and work, right? That's about biology. So we picked up a cell that doesn't have lysosome. And the cell that doesn't have lysosome is a reticulocyte. It's the young blood cells. Avram is a physician, I am a physician. So it gave us, we had many disadvantages because we understood nothing in biochemistry. But on the other hand, we had some ideas about medicine. So we took reticulocyte, we enriched reticulocyte by driving rabbits anemic. And the reticulocyte doesn't have lysosome because it expelled it already. It's already on the way to differentiate into the mature red blood cell. So we don't have a background. So whatever we see in the reticulocyte belongs to something else, certainly not the lysosome. So what we do, you take the cells and you break them down and you start to separate and to follow your activity where it is. You need to clean what you do. And we published the first paper in 1978. This is the founding paper of the ubiquitin system, and the rest is history. I will not go into details of the paper. I'll show you just one finding, which was a crucial finding, but I just want to draw your attention to where it was published. It was published in BBRC, in Biochemical and Biophysical Research Communication. This is probably one of the lowest impact factor periodicals ever. I mean, by the way, I love this journal because of these historical reasons and others, but this is the journal, the paper that was mentioned by the Nobel Committee as the founding paper. And again, without going into details, it tells you that what is important is what you publish and not where you publish. And remember it. So I mean, the whole story about nature and science and cell and impact factor, for me, let me be rude, it's bullshit. Big bullshit. But I think that it's a wrong culture that people are after. It has no importance at all. Maybe one day people will be smarter than they are today and get rid of this wrong culture. At least I grew up on a different culture and I still hold to it. Now, what was unique to this first paper? One table put the history. Now, what is this one table? And typically proteases dance tango. Sorry for bringing Argentina into Brazil. Well, samba, maybe samba. Well, this evening we are going to a samba show, so I don't know how samba is being danced. But, you know, tango, you know, you can dance with a partner, but you can dance a little bit by yourself. So proteases can dance tango by themselves. You take trypsin, you give it a protein, it is degraded. The protein, you give it a chymotrypsin, it is degraded. Different degradation, different amino acid, but at the end it will be degraded. So proteases are kind of solo players. They can do it by themselves. Here we took the lysate. So what we did, we took the reticulocyte, we put water, we spun down all the membranes, we took the supernatant, the cytosol, and we got what we wanted. We got exactly what we wanted. We got degradation of a protein, doesn't matter, we use labeled globin, just forget about it. Minus energy, we got 1.5%. We added energy, we got 10%. So we already had non-lysosomal, because there is no lysosome, energy-dependent proteolysis of a model protein. So we got half of what we needed. We still didn't know anything about mechanism, about specificity. Then we wanted to clean it. So we put it on a column, doesn't matter even which column. Some of the protein came out of the column because they didn't absorb to the column, and some of the protein absorbed to the column, and we had to elute them with salt. One shot of salt, doesn't matter. Very primitive, embarrassingly primitive technology. So we got fraction 2, the protein that came out, and fraction 2, the protein that we had to forcefully elute. None of them had any activity. Well, this had 0, this has little. We had to combine the two in order to get it back. Wow, this is a tango of 2. It's not a tango of 1. This was the critical, most important critical experiment I've ever carried out in my life. Because remember that the cell has 5,000 proteins, 10,000 proteins. Fraction 1 and fraction 2 are just crude separation. So we maybe put 2,500 on one side and 2,500 on the other side. But who told us that fraction 1 has only one active ingredient that is needed in order to stimulate degradation in the other? Maybe it has 2. Maybe it has fraction 1a and 1b. But maybe 1a has 1a prime and 1a2 prime. The number became endless. Once you are above 1, you are in the dark, in the complete dark. You don't know where you are. Then there was a critical step in my PhD. I had to buy a very warm coat and move to the cold room. So for the rest of the 4 years, I spent in the cold room, separating and separating and separating and separating. At the end of the day, when I left the lab to do a postdoc at MIT, I left behind 12 pure proteins, 12, that were all needed to be in the same tube in order to degrade a protein. 12. Now, this was not the final number, but the tricky was that I knew exactly what the 12 are doing. I knew the sequence of events of what they are doing. I will show you in a scheme later on. So it was not just 12 that had to be mixed together. I knew who is first, who is second, who is third, who is fourth. And then came April of 2000. I was already grown up, a full professor in the institute. April of 2000, the human genome, the first human genome, was published in Nature. And the ubiquitin system that we discovered, 12 was a joke, contains almost 2,000 proteins. 2,000 proteins. It's the biggest family in the database. 2,000 proteins that are serving what people thought is garbaging. Let's garbage it. So the cell paid a huge attention to this part of quality control, huge attention. Many more proteins are required to degrade a protein than proteins that are required to synthesize a protein. But this is not a fair comparison because synthesis is also dependent on nucleic acid, on DNA, on RNA. So their information is not embedded in protein. It's embedded in nucleic acid. Here, everything is a protein-protein game. So nature paid a lot of attention to it, and almost 2,000 proteins are sitting under the umbrella of the ubiquitin system. And I'll show you just briefly how it works, and we'll jump quickly to medicine just to show you the translation of it. So we have a protein that has to be degraded. We call it the target. I kind of made it like a wool ball. In order to be degraded, again, and here we come to the specificity, something must happen to the protein. Because remember that the shark, the ubiquitin system, and the victim are swimming together in the same aquarium, but one doesn't recognize the other. That's the beauty. The ubiquitin system is everywhere, in the cell, in the nucleus, inside the mitochondria, in the ER, in the cytosol, of course. So the shark and the victim are swimming together, but the shark doesn't touch the victim because the victim is okay. Something must happen to the victim. Misfolding, mutation, something, damage, that the shark will jump on it. And why I bring always the example of the shark, because people claim, I never tried it and I suggest that you will not try it either, swimming next to a shark. The story is that you need to bleed for the shark to smell or to sense the blood in order that it will, will predate you. But let's don't do this experiment. I'm not sure whether it's an urban story or it's reality or it's a truth. But nevertheless, in this case, what happened to the target, it's phosphorylated. There is a kinase that senses that something happened. It's phosphorylated, double phosphorylated. This is an example. This is I-kappa B alpha. This is a protein that we have been working forever in the lab. It's the inhibitor of NF-kappa B. And I love this protein because of many reasons. But something must happen to it in order for the shark to jump on it. What is the shark? A ubiquitin ligase. It's kind of a protein that will immobilize the protein to be degraded. It's kind of handcuffing it. And then, in parallel and independently, ubiquitin, which is a small molecule, highly evolutionarily conserved, 76 amino acid residues, is activated by ubiquitin activating enzyme. From there, it's jumping to an E2, which is called ubiquitin conjugating enzyme, doesn't matter. And from there, it goes to the target. And it marks the target not one time, but many times. So the first ubiquitin binds to the molecule, to the target, the second to the first, the third to the second, to build a degradation signal, which is called polyubiquitin chain. Poly, many, ubiquitin chain. So the Nobel Committee called the polyubiquitin chain the kiss of death. So the system kisses the protein to its death. I'm not sure that the term is exactly right, but, or at least emotionally expresses what it should express, but nevertheless, then come the shark. Only then come the shark. And here the specificity buried. Come the proteasome, the real scissors. Ubiquitin is the glue. Basically, ubiquitin is a molecular glue. It binds the target to the scissors. The target is opened and bang, degraded. So you need ubiquitin in order to glue the target to the protein. And that's the specificity. The specificity is in recognition. The specificity is not in the scissors. The recognition is by the ubiquitin ligase. And out of the 2,000 proteins, 1,000 are these policemen called ubiquitin ligases. The E3, this guy. There are thousands of them. They are like policemen that are kind of scouting all the suburbs of Sao Paulo, looking for thieves, for predators, for robbers, all around. Once they catch one, they will bind it, and then ubiquitin will be conjugated, and then they will call the executioner to kill it. Unlike what happens in the stomach, that the executioner is the only actor, trypsin, and that's it. We don't need anything else. Here we have several steps, and the first step is specificity, recognition that something indeed happened to you, and then we shall handcuff you. We shall bind ubiquitin to you. We shall put you on a ubiquitin ligase, and only then we shall call the executioner. So the specificity issue was solved. And of course, activation of ubiquitin requires ATP. Now everything falls in place. We really, once we discovered the mechanism, we realized that the whole story is gone. We know at least the principal step. We didn't know the importance yet, but we knew that it's novel. It was the first time that this modification was discovered. It reminds me of a joke that somebody sends a paper to the editor, and the editor said, wow, this is a wonderful paper that you sent me. It's both novel and important. However, the important part is not novel, and the novel part is not important. So you see, you need to close the story on both ends. You might have something novel, but who cares? So, but it took years. It's not us. It took years for the community to really work on it. There are now more than, I think, 300,000 papers on the ubiquitin system. Big drug industry. It became really a major. So now let's jump to medicine quickly. To the translation. The system grew. There are proteins that are like ubiquitin, like sumo and NED8. So it's a big family that makes many functions. The ubiquitin system fulfills many functions, not only degradation and so on and so forth. I will not go into the complication. But at the end of the day, the ubiquitin system looks like a tree. There is a single activating enzyme, about 50 conjugating enzyme, and more than 1,000 ubiquitin ligases, and more than 10,000 known substrates. So we already know that at least half of the proteome in the cell is targeted by the ubiquitin system in a specific manner. So it really became huge. It's like a major, fundamentally important system. But let's go to medicine. You know, medicine is a profession of numbers. I hate mathematics because I'm a little bit dyslexic. But at the end of the day, it's numbers, right? Blood pressure is a number. Sight is a number. Glucose level is a number. Calcium, phosphate, everything is a number at the end of the day. If you remember, most of you are medical students, I assume, you know, the second half of Harrison or Cecil are tables of numbers. It tells you, now you can use up to date and, you know, whatever you like, which is in your pocket or your cell phone. In my days, we still used books. So it's numbers. So proteins are also a number. You know, immunoglobulin, we have 3 grams per cent. Albumin, we have 4 grams per cent. Transferrin, we have 100 milligrams per cent. I mean, everything is, and once we deviate, we are in a disease, right? You know, deviation, you know, if we have less albumin because we have a nephrotic syndrome, we have hypoalbuminemia, right? Or the liver doesn't function, it produces albumin. So proteins can be normal at normal level, but they can be below their level or they can be above their level. If the system is hyperactive, the protein will go down. If the system is hypoactive, decreased degradation, the protein will go up. And as far as the ubiquitin system, each of the states is a disease. And I'll bring you 2 examples and then we'll go to medicine. So think about the brain. I will not talk about brain diseases, but the system plays a major role in neurodegeneration. This is the brain of early onset Alzheimer's disease, people that get Alzheimer's at the age of 30 or 40. And once you stain the brain, so you see this in immunohistochemistry, each rectangle is a patient. We stain them for ubiquitinated protein that are got ubiquitinated, but the scissors somehow cannot come and cut them. And you see that the brain of this juvenile onset Alzheimer's disease is scattered with ubiquitinated proteins. So this is one example, and I can tell you the same story you will see in ALS and in Parkinson and in Huntington and in all those neurodegenerative diseases. But let's go to cancer. Cancer is much more easy to understand as far as the example. And I told you already that all the oncoproteins are basically proteins that should be removed, but have not been removed properly, and therefore we develop cancer. And let's talk about 2 types of cancer. One type of cancer is when a good protein, a tumor suppressor like p53, is excessively degraded. The prime example, human papillomavirus induced uterine cervical carcinoma. What happened there? The virus encodes an oncogene called E6, you know, the human papillomavirus. E6 recognizes the virus is very smart. Many viruses know how to exploit the ubiquitin system for the replication purposes. E6 combines to p53. The ubiquitin system looks at it and say, hey, guy, I don't know you. Where are you coming from? You are foreign to me, and it degrades it. So it degrades healthy p53 that somehow a protein, another foreign protein combined to it, and exposes the cell to malignant transformation. Now, this strategy by the virus is a very smart strategy. If you want to break into the bank, you don't go to the safe. You go to the alarm system, and you turn off the alarm system before you go to the safe. This is what the virus is doing. P53 is an alarm protein. It's a DNA damage protein, alarm protein. So if there will be a damage to the DNA and P53 is functional, it will stop the cell division and will announce an alarm. But if P53 is not there, it cannot turn the alarm on. And HPV is an alarming protein because it made a cut in the DNA and insert itself into the human genome. Normally, the cut should have been sensed by P53, but there is no P53 because P53 was turned down by the virus, and the virus can go on and replicate. So this is a very smart strategy by the virus. So you see that degradation of a tumor suppressor will lead to cancer. On the other hand, lack of degradation of an oncogenic protein will also lead to cancer. Think about another very common disease, breast cancer in women. Breast cancer in women, one type of them, I will not go to all the types, the one that is caused by a mutation in the EGF receptor. The EGF receptor is truncated in the mutation. The ectoplasmic tail is being cut, and the truncated receptor is not responsive anymore to EGF, to the ligand. Because it's not responsive, it stimulates all the time, uncontrolled. Typically, for the normal receptor, EGF binds, it sends the stimulus, but then the whole complex is being engulfed and go to the lysosome to be degraded. So there is an on and off reaction. In this case, there is no off reaction. It's on and on and on and on. So this is an example of an oncogene, that a mutated receptor, growth stimulating receptor, that is stimulating the cell in an uncontrolled manner. How we treat it? We treat it by Herceptin, by an antibody that can somehow bind to the little tail that was remained and can cluster 3 abnormal receptors together, and the clustering signals entry of this mutated protein into the cell. So that's the mechanism of Herceptin, of this antibody. But we should give the antibody only to women that have a mutated EGF receptor. We shouldn't give it, of course, to women that have a mutation in the estrogen receptor. We should give them tamoxifen. So this is the beginning of what we call personalized medicine, how we fit the treatment to the real mutation. So here you see in cancer, 2 examples of either excessive degradation of a tumor suppressor or a lack of degradation of an oncogene. And accordingly, drugs were developed. The first drug that came to the market, for those of you who are hemato-oncologists, is an inhibitor of the scissors of the proteasome, and it's being used for multiple myeloma. Now, multiple myeloma, for those of you who don't know, it's a leukemia. It's a B-cell leukemia, very common disease. It's about 20% of all the leukemias and about 3% of all malignancies. And this is the drug. This is the first drug. There are other generations. It's an inhibitor of the proteasome of the scissors. And you can see here a patient. You can see here the galloping. It's a B-cell leukemia, so the B-cell, we can use a biomarker, which are the antibodies that are being secreted. In this case, it's an immunoglobulin A, and you see the galloping level. Chemotherapy started here. It helped for a little bit, but then the disease relapsed. And here you can see treatment with, at that time, it was called PS341 or Valcade, and there is a complete remission of the patient. The patient is basically at that phase disease-free, and you can see the bone marrow, and you can see the malignant bone marrow that with 41% of what we call tumor burden that went down to less than 1%, and repopulation of the bone marrow with all the normal cells. It's a big success. I remember myself as a medical student, people died from the disease within few months in agony, pathological fracture, renal insufficiency, hypoxia, infections because of suppression of all the white blood cells and the thrombocytes and so on. Now people, all of them are responding, not to this treatment, but to a combination. They live many years. Some of them are cured. Many live 10 and 15 years in very good and high quality of life. This series of drugs is a true revolution in cancer therapy, at least as big as immune therapy. Now, let me just conclude. This is a non-Hodgkin lymphoma. You can see another one. You can see the tumor at the gate, at the hilum of the right lung, and you can see that the tumor was shrinking from 2.5 on 1.2 to 0.4 on 0.4. It's a single drug. We never use, this is only in clinical trials. We never use for tumors, almost for any tumor, a single drug. We are always using a combination. Now let me go to the last one. And the last one is the future, like Mickey Halbertal told you about the future of the hospital. So I will tell you about the future of the ubiquitin system, and that's molecular glue. It's already in use. If you look at the textbook of pharmacology, most of the drugs that you'll see are inhibitors. Look at cancer. We are using kinase inhibitors. Look at blood pressure. You're using beta receptors in beta adrenergic inhibitors. We are typically using inhibitors in pharmacology. It's very difficult to develop agonists. We are typically develop antagonists. But in the case, because cancer is being caused by mutated proteins and neurodegeneration by aggregated protein, the idea was to develop agonists that will force degradation. And I'll bring you one example. What is an agonist? An agonist is a product. I exaggerated with the size here, but the product is proteolysis targeting chimera. It's a chimera is this old Greek monster that have two heads. And the chimera binds on one hand to ubiquitin ligase, to element of the ubiquitin system, and on the other hand, the red one, to the target protein, any target protein. It's a glue. It's a matchmaker. It brings a substrate and the ubiquitin system together, though normally they will never meet. And once the substrate meets the ubiquitin system, here ubiquitin, here the substrate, here is the glue, it gets ubiquitinated and degraded. And we are using it in order to degrade many proteins, oncogenes, now also in trial our brain protein, and this will be the future. And I bring you just, the first one actually was thalidomide. I don't know if you remember thalidomide, the old people here probably remember thalidomide. Thalidomide was a drug that was developed by a German-Swiss company in the 60s for women that vomit during pregnancy. Very quickly, it was discovered that the babies that are being born are horrendous. They were born without hands, without legs, and so on. The drug was teratogenic. It led to huge malformation in the babies. Now we know why. I'll go into it later. But thalidomide is exactly this molecule. It has two heads, and it binds on one hand to the ubiquitin system. In this case, it's cereblon. On the other hand, it binds to substrate of the ubiquitin system. In this case, it's Aiolos or Icaros, doesn't matter. Ubiquitinates them and degrade them. So thalidomide was the first, actually the drug was buried in the ground, never to be heard of. But then the NIH, the National Health Institute in the United States, pulled out all these drugs for repurposing. They tried them on cell culture, and they found that once you put thalidomide on lymphocyte, it killed them. And then they went to the mechanism, and not thalidomide, but the successors of thalidomide are now in heavy use all over the world, including, of course, in Brazil, not for pregnant women, but for people with life-threatening leukemia. And you see here, this is lenalidomide, causes selective degradation of zinc finger protein in multiple myeloma cells. Another paper from Nature, lenalidomide, another derivative, induces ubiquitination of CK1 alpha in myelodystrophic syndrome, which is a precursor of leukemia, and so on and so forth. Now, this development is of huge potential because we design any drug that we want. We need, on one hand, a head that will bind to the ubiquitin system, and we need to bind only to one or two ligases. So this is kind of what we call universal head. And on the other hand, what we can do is screen libraries for binders to our target protein. There are many libraries of million compound, and then we put the two together, and bang, you have, I would say, a potential drug. Of course, drugs have to undergo a series of clinical trials and so on. But basically, all the drug companies in the world are now very busy in developing products against RAS, against aggregated proteins, in ALS and so on, in diseases that are completely unmet, that there is no answer in medicine to. Think about pancreatic cancer, think about ovarian cancer, about liver cancer, biliary cancer, stomach cancer, think about all the neurodegenerative disease. All those are now on the table with the biggest companies using this type of technology. So let me finish. This is what we are doing now in the lab. We develop our own drug. You can see here in model animals that we can shrink, and now we are moving very quickly to clinical trials. This is based on a completely different principle. The list of people that helped me along the way is huge, but I think that the one that should be mentioned more than anybody else is Avram Hershko, whom I didn't even put here. Oh no, here he is, who was my mentor. He's really a superb biochemist. I mean, it shows you this system could have never been discovered using modern screening or genetic techniques. You need to build it from building blocks, doing classical biochemistry. No, genetics could have shown you that you can inhibit the system by pulling out one of the chains, one of the links of the chain, but then you don't know where it belonged to the chain and how the chain is working. So this is an example of what classical biochemistry can do. So it all ended up here in 2004 when I got the Nobel Prize from the King of Sweden. I want just to show you the medal, because the medal, there is a lot to learn from it. Of course, the face of Alfred Nobel here. He was born in 1833, died in 1896, and in his will, he left the money that he made out of many patents, including dynamite, for a prize that was given 5 years later the first time. One interesting discovery, that the first prize in physics was given to Konrad Röntgen for inventing the X-ray. But the back of the coin is very nice. First of all, you can see here, if you can see my name, it is inscribed here with a year, 4. But you see two women. One woman takes the scarf out of the other woman, and the other woman holds the horn of knowledge very close to her chest. This woman is called science. I think that, I don't know if you can see it here, it says here science. This woman is called nature. You see here it says natura. This is the interplay between nature and science. The role of science is to unveil the secrets of nature for the benefit of people. So that's the story of the Nobel. And let me just end up by saying that when we started, we had no clue of the Nobel. We didn't aim at the Nobel. We didn't aim at medicine. We were just driven by curiosity and, most importantly, by passion. And we saw that this is a niche that still needs to be discovered, that people are not working on it, and see what happened to it after, started in 76, after almost 50 years. The whole world is working on it, and mostly it saved and still keep on saving and will save more millions and millions of lives worldwide. So this is, for me as a physician, physicians, I'm not comparing, of course, medicine, but in physician, you are treating patients one by one, by one, by one. If you are lucky enough in science, you can impact the lives of millions without even knowing their names. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Aaron is kind enough to take a few questions. So you know, have a seat, Professor. Anywhere you want. Between 2 and 3 questions only, I was told. Please. Ali, professora Helena, e depois eu tinha visto mais alguém levantou a mão. Aqui primeiro, ó, aqui, ó, ali, ó. Ele tinha levantado a mão primeiro. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, good morning. So on behalf of everyone here, we want to thank you because that was a really inspiring speech. And you made complex issues and complex themes really easy to understand. So we really thank you for that. I'd really like to know where you think, how long you think it would take, maybe for the next 10, 15, 20 years, how long it would take for us to find the cure for the neurological diseases that we talked about, for example, Parkinson's.
You know, the short answer is that I don't know. You know, there is a Jewish say that said that from the time that the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, prophecy was given to the foolish people. So I don't want to prophesize. But I think that for cancer, I think we are making a big progress. And we know it already. There is immune therapy and so on. People are living longer. We didn't solve it. For neurodegeneration, I think that we start to understand it. You know, first of all, is to understand mechanisms. And we understand that it's a failure of the quality control system. This is one tool. I'm not saying that this is going to be the cure, but this is one tool. There is already a drug, if you noted, that was approved by the FDA just now. Lenacam, there are several antibodies that were approved just recently that dissolve the aggregate. They bind to it and they take them to degradation. Again, it's degradation by another system because this complex of antibody aggregated protein will take it to macrophages for degradation, and it slows down the disease significantly, and it even improves the cognitive state. So, you know, for the first time, after decades and decades, there is already a progress in Alzheimer's. Now, because all these neurodegenerative diseases have one common hallmark, which is aggregated proteins, all what you need to do, if the principle will hold, is to develop specific antibodies to the culprit protein in ALS that can be TD43 or SOD or whatever, to the one in Huntington that can be Huntington, polyQ expanded Huntington, and so on. So if the principle will hold, I believe that at least improvement is behind the corner. 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, but I just read about this one. It's the last month progress that was announced about the success of the clinical trial. It came with very severe side effects, I must admit. Some of the patients died because the dissolution of the aggregates led to softening of blood vessels and the patient bled into the brain, but very few of them. The rest benefited. So nevertheless, the FDA decided to go ahead and to approve them for use. So I think that here you see that one principle was broken, dissolving aggregated proteins. So I believe that, I don't know, it's behind the corner, but people start to put their hand on it.
Professor, I just want to thank you for bringing back faith to youth, because we pass several years here in our country with people throwing stones on science. And your lecture was, I'm crying, really. Thank you so much, because this room is full of students, the ones that believe that they can change the world. And your lecture told them also a very important aspect. It's not where you publish, but the quality of what you publish. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just, I need to comment one thing about what you said now. I don't want to relate to throwing stones. We get it in Israel too. Doesn't matter. I will not go into it. I just want to tell you that the single reason that you are all here now in this hall without masks, talking to one another, eating together, and your life is back to normal is due to one thing: progress in science. The vaccine made it.
Thank you, Professor Aaron. It's an honor for me to see you here in my university, see your lecture. And I want to question you about advice for students who are in PhD and graduation, and well, what you can advise we?
Well, I can only, I'll answer that briefly. I can only reflect on my own career because everybody has his own career. The first thing is that I gave up on medicine. So you should not stick to something. I liked medicine a lot. It's a very rich profession, but I wanted to understand the roots of diseases. So I'm not telling you to leave medicine or whatever. I'm telling you that whatever you do in life, do it after a gut feeling of what you really want to do. And nothing will happen if you change. You know, I changed, I left medicine, I went. I think that life, it has to do with your philosophy. Life is not about achieving a target. You know, here you are a medical student, you want to get an MD, right? You want to be a doctor. Once you're a doctor, you want to be an expert. You want to be a surgeon. Once you're a surgeon, you want to be the head of the department. Once you're head of the department, you want to be rich, to have private practice. And then you die. So I think that if you look at life as a collection of experiences, that you move from one to another and you enjoy it, that's my philosophy. So you ask me, people are asking me, oh, you got the Nobel Prize and this prize, what you are doing today, I enjoy it. I go to the lab, I have a very good group of students, we publish, we develop drugs. I enjoy what I do. So this is one advice that I can give you. Tell yourself what you are good at and do it. It doesn't matter whether if you want to dance, dance. If you want to be an architect, be an architect. Do whatever you feel. Don't surrender to any social pressure. This is one. Now, within the profession, go always to be with experts. I always, you know, when I was a physician and I chose my mentor, my PhD mentor, I was interviewed by 10. I didn't go, knocked on the first door and said, oh, take me. And 9 out of the 10 told me, oh, I work on this protein and you will do this and this and that and that and that. Everything was like looking shiny. The only one that was very cautious and warned me not to come was the one that I ended up with. Why? Because he told me I'm young. He just came from a postdoc himself. He was very young, just returned from a postdoc. He said, I have a theory that there might be a system, but there might be not. And we are taking a big bet. If you are kind of a risk taker and you want to make this journey with me, you are welcome. But remember, you may fail. I liked it. I think that, you know, risk taking in life, you know, if you take the paved road, all the cars are running on the paved road. But if you take the non-paved road, you take a risk. But on the other hand, you have a chance of, you know, being successful. That's the second advice. Choose what you are good at and work with the good people. Now, working with the good people has also a continuation. Leave Brazil initially and go, just wait for the end. I'll bring you back to Brazil. And go to see how science or medicine, doesn't matter, is being done in a different culture. My institute offered me a full position in a lab when I graduated. I had many papers and they said, stay here. I said, no, I'm leaving. One, I want to be exposed to a different culture. I want to polish my English. I want to see how other people. And two, I want that people will identify me independently of my mentor. Because if you stay in the same place, they will always say it's your mentor, it's not you. If you go to another place and you develop yourself, you will be the one to be identified. And then I decided to go to the best place in the world. I don't know if the best or the second best. I went to MIT, which is I don't have to tell you, it's a premier, unbelievable university, however you look at it. And I stayed there for 5 years and built my own identity. And then there was the last advice that I can give you, there was a decision whether to come back or not. I had many offers, and I decided to come back because of many reasons. One, of course, is very personal, you know, family, friends, food, music, history, military service, whatever make you part of a society. But the other hand is that they gave me an opportunity. They gave me money, they gave me a lab, they gave me an incentive to come back. They told me, you can do it here also. And that's what Israel adopted as a policy, that we attract young people back. Not all of them are coming back, but at least they open the door for you. And that, you know, and I think that if you go to the United States and be at MIT, you will see a shining world. But Brazil needs you more than America. America has millions like you, but Brazil not. You are still a developing country. So I decided to go to a country in the early 80s. It was still developing, it still develops, and to contribute to my own country in my own way. So I think that if you take a list of what I told you, it's all my own career. It has nothing to do with others. But I think that it has the seeded elements of a success. Do what you're good at, work with good mentors, go abroad, and then pay back to your country what it gave you initially.
Well, Professor, I think we have to finish now. Once again, I thank you so much. We are honored to have you. Would like to say anything? Yeah, Arsha?
There's another question.
Oh, okay. Where?
Is there another question?
Here. Yeah. Okay. So I'll. Sorry.
Good morning, Dr. Aaron. It's an honor to have you here. I would like to ask you, what made you pursue science? I mean, I watched your lesson, and at the first time I thought making science it's pretty boring. But you show me that the things you change in society is so much more than just doing experiences. It's like a changing thing in people's lives.
Yeah, but this is in retrospect. I didn't know that I'm going to change people's life. So that's backwards. I pursued science, again, you know, I was a physician, which, as I said, is a great profession, is really a great profession. But I wanted to understand, it was naive at the time. Now, when I go back to it, I realize that I came back to this. I wanted to understand why diseases start from the very beginning. Because if you ask, and I repeated it several times, when you see a patient in the hospital, it's much too late. Go to cardiology, for example. When a patient is coming with a heart attack, nevertheless he survived, he already has a big disease. You know, he has occlusion of the coronary artery, cholesterol has been accumulated there for decades, and luckily he remained, you know, in life, despite the fact that the major artery was occluded by clot, by atheroma, and so on. And I wanted to understand why it starts. Cancer. When a patient comes with a symptom of cancer, he said, oh, I have an abdominal pain, or I have a headache, or I have a blurred vision. You do an MRI, you see the glioblastoma, you go to the abdomen, you see the pancreatic cancer, it's gone. Not in all cases of cancer. There are cancers that you can, but it's always late. I wanted to understand the very root. It was a very naive thinking of a young boy that doesn't understand anything in science, maybe a young physician, and it came back to me only now after I, established my career. Now I start to understand really what are the diseases. So it was all about curiosity. It was all about curiosity. I started in medicine. I thought medicine it's a very nice profession. You help people and so on. You learn biology, you understand pathology, and so on and so forth. But I really wanted to take a step back for the background. And I think that this is another advice that I can tell you, because I heard from you that you have a very good MD PhD program. We have also an MD PhD program. And I think that I don't regret for a minute. On the contrary, the fact that I'm also a physician. It enriched my world in an unbelievable way, because I talk the medical language. I'm working next to the hospital. I'm working with sick patients. I'm working with pathologists. We are developing anti-cancer drug. We are correlating it to the clinical files. I think that this combination is a golden combination, the MD PhD. It's really a golden combination. And again, it's going back to what I told this young lady behind. It's a little bit long. It's 7 years of medical school, another 5 years of PhD, and so on. But it's enjoyable. Look at it as a step in your enjoyable life. Don't count years. Look at it as something that you just enjoy to do, rather than counting years. We are not here to count years. And then the whole world will open for you. And I think that this MD PhD program, though it's a little bit long, it's one of the best programs that any medical school can offer to its student. We encourage it. I have MD PhD student in my lab. One of my MD PhD students now is a full professor in the faculty and running the cancer center. Another one is in pathology. We are working together on specimen. It's an unbelievable program.
Thank you, Professor. So before we finish, I have two announcements. First one is a request that if we could take a picture afterwards here with the audience and you. So Anna will take care of that. And Professor Rubens Belfort has an invitation for all of you.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do it in Portuguese, okay? Como você sabe, a diretoria da escola formou uma comissão para comemorar os 90 anos da Escola Paulista de Medicina, isso quer dizer 90 anos de excelência. Tem muita instituição excelente, nós somos excelentes há 90 anos. E a ideia é continuar assim. Essa é uma das sessões que a gente vai fazer durante todo o ano. Então, vocês vão ouvir falar da gente. É uma comissão que a diretoria apontou, várias pessoas. E vai ter também uma parte de festa. 11 de novembro, marquem seus calendários. A gente vai fazer uma bela de uma festa para comemorar os 90 anos de excelência. Eu espero que pelo menos um de vocês vire Prêmio Nobel no futuro. O Brasil teve um Prêmio Nobel que nasceu aqui, né, o Medawar, mas foi embora há 14 anos, mais ou menos. Algum de vocês precisa ganhar o Prêmio Nobel e ficar aqui. Obrigado.
Obrigada a todos por terem vindo. E aí, vamos, se puderem ficar sentados, só para a gente tirar uma foto com o professor.
Eu vou postar no Instagram da escola, então depois, se vocês quiserem.